Jason, still stunned, finally spoke up. What do you mean? You're going to fire us. Is that it? There was an edge of fear creeping into his voice, and it was clear that the rest of the crew shared his anxiety. But James shook his head. No, he said, I'm not going to fire anyone. Not yet. But I'm taking control now. Effective immediately, this airline is going through a massive overhaul. I'm bringing in a new team, a new culture. And that starts with accountability. His eyes locked onto Sarah, who had been silently observing from the back. And I need people like you, Sarah, who understand the stakes, who aren't afraid to make things right. Sarah's heart raced. She had never imagined her flight would lead to this. But in that moment, everything clicked into place. She knew now that James wasn't just the new CEO. He was the catalyst for everything that was about to change. But just as she began to feel the weight of the opportunity in front of her, something unexpected happened. The intercom crackled to life, cutting through the tension. It was the captain's voice, strained but calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been informed that the airline's corporate board has voted in favor of a major restructuring initiative. Effective immediately, the new CEO has full control of all operational decisions. The announcement hit everyone like a ton of bricks. The gravity of James's power was no longer a subtle threat. It was a reality. The crew looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Some were afraid, others were uncertain, and a few, like Sarah, were beginning to see this as a fresh start, a chance to be part of something better. But just as it seemed everything was coming to a head, the captain added, "And one more thing. James Thompson is not only the new CEO of this airline, he is also the majority shareholder and has officially bought out the controlling stake in the company." The word sent a ripple of shock through the cabin. James wasn't just leading a turnaround. He had *owned it all along. He had orchestrated his rise not through public announcements or flashing moves, but through quiet, careful planning. The crew had mocked him, thinking he was just another passenger, unaware that they were dealing with a man who had already secured their future in his hands. The plane's engines hummed steadily, but inside, the tension was at its peak. James had not only come to take charge, he had already taken it all. The very airline that had overlooked him was now under his full control, and the change was no longer a question. It was inevitable. As the flight began its descent, Sarah found herself caught between awe and disbelief. James had outmaneuvered them all, not with anger, but with a plan so precise it had been hidden in plain sight. The world was about to change, and she knew it. But one final thought gnawed at her. In the rush of this new beginning, who would really be the ones left standing at the end? Would they rise to the challenge, or be swept aside by a force they never saw coming? The answers were still to come, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. As the plane touched down, the crew was left to process the whirlwind of events. Sarah, now realizing the magnitude of what had just unfolded, understood the full scope of James's vision. This wasn't just about personal success. It was about dismantling old systems and building something better, something inclusive. The flight attendants who had once mocked him were now part of the very change they'd resisted. James's plan was just beginning, and Sarah felt a new sense of purpose. She was ready to be a part of it. As for the crew, they would either adapt or be left behind in an industry rapidly evolving. James had shown them all the power of vision and the cost of underestimating those who didn't fit the mold. The future of the airline, and perhaps the industry itself, was in his hands now. But as Linda spoke, Sarah couldn't help but notice the way James was studying the conversation, his eyes narrowing slightly. It was as though he could hear every word, even if they weren't directly aimed at him. Sarah felt a sudden pang of guilt. What if she had been wrong about him? What if this was more than just a matter of someone feeling slighted? Back in the cockpit, the pilots were unaware of the tension unfolding below. They were focused on the flight path, their conversation casual. But there was a strange feeling in the air, an unspoken understanding that something was off. The crew's energy was off, the usual rhythm disrupted. It was as if every moment was building toward something, but no one could yet predict what it would be. James stood up abruptly, catching the attention of everyone around him. He walked towards the front of the cabin, calm but deliberate. His every step was measured, each movement reflecting the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of and exactly what the airline needed. At that moment, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't explain why, but she knew this was the turning point. Whatever James was about to do, it was going to be something big, something that would change everything. As James reached the front of the cabin, the crew's laughter stopped, replaced by a sudden, heavy silence. The tension in the air was thick. Everyone could feel something was about to happen. But imagine sitting in first class, about to board a flight, when you overhear staff mocking a passenger, thinking they're just another regular traveler. But what if that passenger wasn't who they seemed? What if they had the power to change everything about the airline you've taken for granted? This is the story of how a Black executive, disrespected and underestimated by a crew that didn't know his identity, would soon turn the tables in the most unexpected way. In a moment that could have been just another instance of poor customer service, an opportunity for redemption and transformation was born. How did this encounter spark a revolution inside the airline? Stay tuned to find out. The man in question wasn't just any passenger. He was James Thompson.